A very good morning, Uganda. Today we're discussing a topic that many have had views about, opinions, and a couple of things to say about it. And of course we'll be looking at the issue of corruption and the fight against it. But I have a whole panel here of very interesting gentlemen who will be discussing with us in regards to this. The extreme end there is Julius Kipepwe, who is Director of Programs from gov't Network. And right next to him is a friend here and colleague, that is Chirabo Robert Nyonyintono. And of course, the man, the one and only, very outspoken, with us here also is indeed, we could call you a peace ambassador, isn't it?
Yes,
you are a peace ambassador. Yes. And he is with us here in the studios. And of course, he's representing Global Peace Foundation there. And of course, that is Kambura, Milton. And the other day he was saying, well, I do believe a lot in a couple of things. I and the president seem to be having a similar mind.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Now, these three gentlemen are going to be joining me, and we're going to be discussing a couple of issues in regards to corruption and, of course, the fight. But before we get into much of the discussion, real quick, I'll throw this back at you, Julius. Tell us about gov't Network. Let us understand what gov't Network is about.
Thank you and good morning, viewers and listeners, because we know there are also those online.
Yes.
gov't Network basically is a national policy advocacy organization that looks at people's participation in influencing government affairs for overall promotion of prudent accountability in Uganda.
Interesting.
Mainly focusing on borrowed resources and debt performance generally, so that we can get the value for money for the resources that we often borrow, whether from the domestic sources or externally into the national budget, and then to do service delivery outputs and outcomes to Uganda.
Okay. And you actually say that debt is slavery?
Yes, we still think that even in the current context,
yes,
debt remains slavery.
Indeed, very interesting. Milton Kambura here.
Yes.
Please tell us about the Peace Foundation, the Global Peace Foundation. And also, I must say, I did point out one thing. He is also running or managing, or, you know, the Integrity Uganda. And there's something you said earlier on, the biggest fighter.
Yeah. I congratulate Uganda for this year. Many achievements have been really touched on the issue of corruption, but we are very glad UBC has invited the big fighters in this field, gov't Network and Global Peace Foundation, which is particularly an international organization that is promoting peace around the globe. And you cannot achieve, of course, peace with corruption. Corruption takes everything we have, and indeed in the wrong people, you know. It increases income inequality, you know, conflicts, a lot of stuff. So, but 7 years ago, with my friends, we established another powerful foundation called Integrity Uganda. And the Integrity Uganda is operating in every part of this country. And we are building capacity of workers and companies, and we are working with also Honorable Minister Muruli Mukasa and his ministry. So we train the public servants, but important is also to recognize and award people with integrity in public and private sector. But this year and next year we have been focusing on family strengthening program, making sure parents can help in nurturing children and preparing the next generation that has ethical culture.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Now, real quick, before we get into this discussion, we must go back to the fact that earlier on in the start of the week, we were looking at the celebrations there in regards to anti-corruption. And, of course, the head of state did give a couple of strategies that were pointed out. One of those, the creation of a unit that is in State House that will follow up all reported cases of corruption. Now, the office that will be headed by, that is Carol Edith Nakalima, earlier on we were having this conversation.
Yeah?
Yeah.
On, you know, how it's going to work out. But well, let us take a look at this clip and then we'll be back and have a discussion.
Its impact on the social and economic well-being of the citizens is severe, and it grossly undermines development and stifles efforts to achieve economic transformation and attainment of the national goal of attaining lower-level middle-income status.
Your Excellency, I am glad to report that the zero tolerance to corruption policy was approved by Cabinet in October this year, and it calls for a number of strategies which we shall now begin implementing.
What I was expecting here is to see how we can quickly and effectively assess the public servants who are in charge now and who are responsible for all these mistakes, so that we get rid of them and get new people, or they reform and become good. It is doable because we have enough manpower. We can no longer be blackmailed by the few corrupt people, because there are many other Ugandans who are there ready to do this work. Nali ndowooza nsibiri ebitongole bigenda kukola omulimu ogwo nti IGG bagenda kumukubira n'asitukiramu agezezaako nga bw'agambye mu kwanjula kwe wali. Naye nsazeewo okuseesaamu mu muliro, omanyi omuliro gwetaaga kuseesaamu. Neteekawo omusirikale wange omukyala Lieutenant Colonel Nakalema jangu wano bakulabe bano. Mbadde nkola naye okumala ebbanga ddene, yagenda kusoma ebweru, bwe yakomawo ne mugamba nti kawukuumi atuyitiriddeko. Ne nteekawo office ya abaana abo, balina esimu zaabwe ziri wano. Esimu ate bw'ogikuba tosasula. Balina esimu yaabwe 0800 mugiwandiike 20 25 00. Kati obubbi obwo buseketerera emirimu gya gavumenti. Emirimu egyandibadde gikolebwa tegikolebwa kubanga esente abantu bazijje mu bya gavumenti ne baziteeka mu byabwe.
What a way to walk out of those grounds. But very interesting. Now, a number of things were pointed out. Earlier on we talked about the colonel there, Edith. And of course, many people have been saying a couple of things. We'll get into that later. But real quick, let us look at corruption. Do we seem to understand what this, what kind of effect, or what this really is to us as Ugandans?
We think really corruption has become a cancer now to Africa, not only in Uganda, but when you see a problem becoming cancer, it means when you go to a hospital, the doctor will say even your blood is having part of the cancer. It means it is part of Uganda's culture. You go to a family, our colleagues, you realize these days, parents tell their sons, tell that man I'm not around. I have gone to Chigezi. But the man is in Kampala, he is telling the child. So the magnitude of this discussion holds the most sensitive amount of this country. Unless otherwise men like us and you, the viewers, come out, as the president has said, please the public, join the fight. It means the cancer is beyond himself as a president. He is looking for supporters now. The people of Uganda, all of us, to come out and be part of this battle. It is more sensitive than HIV. It is more sensitive than it is the root cause of what we see in this country, because it goes as far as determining even whether you have a job or not to have a job. If you do not have a job, therefore your family cannot survive, colleagues.
Okay.
The problem of corruption is evident everywhere in society, and like Milton said, it has far-reaching effects. But may I want us to center on misuse of public funds and office, because sometimes what happens in my home might not affect others that so much. But here we have people that have public resources. They're not managing affairs of their homes, but they're managing affairs of the public. And when they mishandle these funds, we see death, even insecurity. We see a lot of criminality. You know, today you have a child kidnapped, tomorrow you hear hangers, and all these things are escalated by corruption. Because if you go to investigate and people investigating are paid money and they leave the investigations, they're not properly, they don't go through the judicial system. Criminality. So it's not only about the aspect of funds only, but this triggers down to even other simple things. It goes to education, universal primary education. There's when government had to do head count, can you imagine, of pupils, because someone will put a huge number and they don't exist. And this money, instead of going to a school and helps children that are really in school, is going at ghost children ghosts that never existed in the first place. So I think where we've reached as Uganda, corruption is known to everybody, and each of us has tasted a pinch of corruption in one way or the other. Yes.
Interesting. Julius.
Thank you. The President, His Excellency Museveni, was talking in context of public service, and therefore I limit myself to such, and quickly point out that in the context of public service there are about 3 or 4 kind of types or categories of corruption. Stealing, obubi, obukumpanyi, wate Muganda udukoro obukumpanyi, obubi, emunyankore, emunyoro udukori, obushuma, so that Ugandans can know what we are talking about. In the don't just sanitize it and coin it, and the other bit is, if I come to the bit to the categories, is to dispute that corruption is not a culture of Uganda. It is a creeping kind of phenomenon. It is not a culture of Uganda. The culture of Uganda is for God and my country. And that's what we aspire to see. That's why we put a brick, each one of us a Ugandan, as far as Article 17 of the Constitution is concerned, for instance, which stipulates that we have a role amongst many other areas, that as Ugandans we have got a role and an obligation to pay tax, but also have an obligation similarly to follow the money and see what our money is doing in public coffers. So in terms of the types, there is the petty corruption, what you could perhaps call it the petty corruption. The common one may be a nurse at maybe at a health facility, some 5,000 shillings for something, to see a doctor before the other people. But itself is also a killer. If you looked at the case of Uganda, we've seen a number of cases, the kind of indiscipline we have on our roads, because we are flouting traffic lights, because many of us many of them, I'm not one of them good enough, many of them are behind the wheels without having gone for testing.
True.
So some of them have fake permits. All that contributes to a bit of what you could call petty corruption, but with adverse implication if you see the kind of indiscipline on the road, the number of deaths that are being reported on a weekly or monthly basis by the traffic department section of police. Then the other category for me would be what would call bureaucratic corruption. A quick example I can give is like what we go through at the land registry. We had about around 2008, we had committed to computerize land registration in Uganda.
Yes.
Because of bureaucracy and all that, that has not been forthcoming. Efforts have been made, therefore the achievement, but a lot more is yet to be done. If you ask any typical person who has dealt with land matters in Uganda, what they go through, it is terrible. So you can imagine the level of loss in respect to investment opportunities that we would have as this country. So there is that category. Then there is the other category that I could talk about lastly for now, what we call grand corruption or political corruption. And I'll give just a quick example. Look at the case of standard gauge railway, which by now we should have had running, like some of the countries, or one of the countries in the region, in the East African community as a case. Ours, not even a brick is there. We've been planning for all the time. There is nothing much that is coming to. Look at Karuma Hydro Power Plant, which is under construction now.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, it would have cost us $600 million to have our 600 megawatts that we would wish to have as this country to be able to gear up our own development and other economic needs. By the time it is complete, this time around, we shall have parted with excess of $2 billion because there was mischief of power centers trying to run to China and other offices, some of the highest offices in this country, to be able to clinch the deals. So you can imagine the level of loss, and maybe for now, lastly, I usually like using cases. So allow me just to look at this as the last one as we talk about grand corruption or political corruption. The president has been eminent on really putting up a fight against corruption. Indeed, previously he has told us how he had those deeper struggles against Amin, even when he was younger. And so how can corruption defeat him? That was about 10 years ago. Today we shall, I think later on at some point, assess how we are doing. But quickly, we've seen around the year 2000, you remember the referendum time, how the NRM caucus would caucus somewhere and be able to do certain things. In 2005, you remember, where over 333 MPs out of that number, 223 MPs were each given some millions of shillings to amend certain articles. That is political corruption, and it becomes part of the problem and perhaps the bedrock of all the different things that later on. You remember the Kosase Commission of Inquiry on a number of things in the 2000s, and the meeting that sat in Chankwan's and simply squashed that report of inquiry around oil that was involving certain ministers. So it is no wonder, therefore, that it is similar names in some of the cases of some of those high-profile individuals that keep filtering through, even as we speak today. There is an issue right on at Parliament that is taking place. So for me, those are kinds of the categories of corruption in the context that the president was speaking at Kololo during the week and this week that we can look at.
So I'll cut you short there. Now, are we seeing this being a bigger problem in civil service, or are we only choosing to victimize?
In just 1 second, I want to tell the country that the problem is bigger than we think.
Yes.
Even if this country got a president, tomorrow, another president, because the problem is bigger than you think, that president cannot even move a week. Because the society seems to be polluted. That's why I'm saying Uganda, of course, has a good culture. But the called corruption has now entered Uganda's culture. From home, in the church, in the government, in even the mosque, on the road, everywhere.
So it's not just an issue of civil
within this second, I want to say that corruption has actually made the family to break down. Because a beautiful lady like you wouldn't want to get married to a man who's corrupt or murimba. That's why young girls they are saying we cannot get married to these funny men.
Rowena, on the contrary, I wouldn't want us to magnify corruption as something that is not touchable or reversible. You know, yes, it is a problem. It is big, but it is something we can do away with.
Very, very true.
It is, we can. There are countries that have ever been corrupted more than Uganda. And today, when you look at their tolerance towards corruption, they have decreased so much. Actually, even in Uganda, there are countries we are doing better. You know, like in East Africa, we are not the first, we are not leading. We are third when we are in the rankings of corrupt countries. So, but all we have to understand is I liked his expression of the forms of corruption. And when you look at each of these forms he talked about, there are remedies.
Yeah.
Correct.
There are remedies. Petty corruption, grand corruption, all these have remedies. So I want us to have this picture of a problem we can solve, not a hill that or a mountain that is so high for us as a nation to climb. I believe, Milton, if we are determined, even in a year's time, we can end corruption.
And from his point, unless you understand the margin, you see, research is good.
Yes.
Some of us, why we say this is in the medium level, this has gone to the worst. I have been in this battle for the last 10 years of fighting corruption. I've made more enemies than friends. Actually, most of the people there hate me. Why? Because when you reach my office, there are systems. If you reach out in my company, in my organization, you realize that from the door there is a word, no, you know, a corrupt-free area. No, nothing from the gate, even in the toilet.
But even police stations that are very clear, police bond is free of charge. Everywhere you go,
the leadership.
These are there.
That's the leadership.
But it's still happening.
Now,
even in public offices.
When you fight corruption, you see there are two things. Going to say that this is a hardware problem is actually easy to solve, because it is all about bringing a new computer, putting it there. We are talking about fighting something spiritual in nature. People are no longer they are no longer even listening to God. It is a spiritual thing. Now, that alone is compromising service delivery. Service delivery is compromised. Our money as Uganda is no longer reaching to the poor Mwananchi to get that road, that quality road. Look at how the ministry, the system break down. You'll realize that in the next 5 years, if Museveni and all of us as a family called Uganda don't contain the problem, of course solutions are already there. We can work on them. But we must understand that the Kaukumi has even made that even trusting one another is very hard. You will bring your own brother to be in that office, but after, because of course conflict of interest, why do you bring your brother? All these offices have cousins, have brothers. The Kaukum is huge. It's big.
Okay, gentlemen, I will give you time after this, but real quick, we have a clip in reactions to what was said really in regards to the fight against corruption. We'll be back so that you can give your view or reaction to this, but let's take a look real quick and be back.
It is an obvious wish for everyone to have an improved standard of living, ranging from beautiful cars, expensive houses, and happy families. Achieving such comes with hard work, which some people tend to keep away from, consequently leading to corruption tendencies.
The university now is graduating maybe 50,000 per year.
So, the catchment area to repress these crooks is very big. The only problem now is the law protecting the corrupt civil servants.
Unfortunately, such challenges are not only confined to developing countries, as developed nations are also seen grappling with similar trials. Such trials have not omitted Uganda, with the 2017 Global Corruption Perception Index ranking it at 151 out of 180 countries.
Double standards are no longer admissible in the international sphere in terms of fighting corruption. So we are fighting here to say no to pardons, no to new laws trying to protect those that are being convicted or in jail, or those laws that create privilege fora in order to protect politicians or their families.
For example, one of the problems we have about corruption not being risky, and the citizen not understanding when people say they have enough evidence. If this hotel was declared mine, and the public is told this is mine, and the investigation authorities cannot find evidence when the thing is there, the public can't understand that.
It is reported that every year, developing countries lose approximately $1.2 trillion in corruption, bribery, theft, and tax evasion. It is for such reasons that anti-corruption crusaders are calling for citizen lifestyle audits with emphasis on sensitization of young people on the dangers of corruption.
Lifestyle audit is a simple thing, is that they will know how much money you are earning officially, if you are working in the formal sector, or if you are doing business, they will know how from your tax returns, and they will know how much money you have extra that can make you develop yourself.
One of the things that we have seen in this country is that there is a gradual closure of spaces through which citizens used to engage government about issues of accountability, about the fight against corruption. The measures that used to be there are no longer there, and therefore the communities have less spaces through which they can engage their leaders, through which they can engage government.
While much progress may have been made in exposing corrupt acts, anti-graft champions want efforts doubled in this quest. This shaped the theme for the National Anti-Corruption Dialogue, which stated that citizens' participation in the fight against corruption a sustainable path to Uganda's transformation. Henry Okurut, UBC.
Thank you so much, Henry Okurut. Now, real quick, gentlemen, one thing that I'm anticipating for is the strategies, but before we go into that, do we see any gaps anyway? Where could the gaps be if we're dealing with this issue? We shall keep talking about anti-graft, but then where could the gaps be?
I think, moderator, as we go to the gaps, I'd wanted to just chip in a little bit on what Mr. Kambura had raised. I would not wish that we create an impression, local and global, that, for instance, Uganda's entire public service is gone, is corrupt. That is not a statement of fact. In fact, from his integrity outfit later on, maybe that he may highlight, there are those who have received accolades for good work. So there are those good public servants, and we must applaud them. In a number of institutions in Uganda, there is where you can go and you really see service happening. There are those that are infested and infected. So we need to make that distinction clear and not simply blanket every person because by virtue of we've seen very diligent teachers, we've seen very diligent secretaries in Ministry of Finance and at the local governments in Enam, in Bujiri, we've seen them in Kanungu. We have seen very dedicated resident district commissioners, Emingaverano in Kanungu, a number of them in Chiriandonga and other places across the country. So that for me is the first bit I wanted to clarify. So, and also on the strategies.
Now let's first identify the gaps and then we'll quick head into...
Yeah, on the gaps, Uganda has got, I could literally say, a forest of policy, legal and institutional regimes. A forest, just look at any typical forest at Buama, at Madira, at Lendu in West Nile, a forest of them, a whole cocktail, with different officials and staff. One of the challenges I see, if I took an example of the Inspectorate of Government, those ladies and gentlemen have done a wonderful, good job in investigations, for instance. Parliament, if you took the Kosasi as a case, has done wonderful job in some of the instances. One of the gaps is on lack of implementation. That may touch on the political will for that to happen, because contrary to the general perception that it is the public servants who are more rotten, we actually seem to think that it is the political class. The political class seems to be part of the problem, and therefore the bigger problem, and therefore the gap. Because upon investigations by different institutions of government, it is the executive who is the head teacher over this country to cause and call for implementation. In 1994, when we had the under the Livestock Services project in the Ministry of Agriculture, the 100 valley dams that we should have received from Isinji-Runtungamo area through Mubende, the cattle corridor to Kotido, so that we improve our beef production capacity as a country and as an economy. The people who store that money are known. It is the aspect of the political will that is the gap to recover that kind of money. So I would think the gaps are mainly to do, even with the current legal regime, for instance, we are able to, the Public Finance and Management Act of 2015 as a case, you are able to have correctional measures in delivery in the management of public resources and in the delivery of services. So the political class,
he has talked, of course, of law, policy and things of that nature. And one of the very mostly common cited ones are the Anti-Corruption Act 2009. And some of the things that were talked about even on Monday that were re-echoed, for example, things like most Ugandans were excited about saying that with the people's property shall be confiscated, or their monies. But this is a re-echo, and we have an act that has been on for quite a while.
Loana, one of the challenges that I look at, what does the public want to know? And what, the Ugandans out there are craving for something, We've accepted there is corruption, but the people out there, this is what they want to see. They want to see arrest and prosecution. And countries that have excelled in the fight against corruption, this is what the route they have taken. Arrest and prosecution. Of late, one of the achievements that we are doing as Ugandans in the fight of corruption is the plea bargain by the Anti-Corruption Court. We have seen someone almost knowing that I'm taken to the gallows and says, I'll refund the money. At least that is a slight achievement. And I was looking at records by the Anti-Corruption Court, and one of the things they were cherishing so much was that about 71 billion was recovered through this method, through Anti-Corruption Court. But where is our problem? One, the gaps you talked about, our investigative machinery as a country. The people there, do they have the will? Are they patriotic enough? Because right from the police officer who is going to go to Milton's home and carry out a search to find some of these documents, does he have the will beyond self that he will enter the house and Milton's wife will come out and say, officer, you're welcome. First come Kachai, then after an envelope, I've seen this happen.
That is not a realistic.
By the time he comes back.
That's an example.
Yeah.
Then away from the officer who is going to come with files or dilute evidence, because I've ever seen this with the Kazinda case. Whereas the media went and one, you're locked out, we climbed trees, and these men that were very upset. One of your people was among the team. The way the officers were very upset. Coming out, hey, hello, hey, now you people, journalists who brought you, it was just like, it has been a party that has ended.
Fashion.
So from there, because it begins with the investigative machinery, then sometimes they have worked and delivered. It goes to the judiciary. Prosecution is very vital. And we have gaps. You have laws, but you know, with Uganda, we choose to take democracy and rule of law. Unlike other countries like China, where you can dictate, like one of our leaders, may he so rest in peace, who one time said, I can't accept these thieves, lining them up, firing squads, and we saw, and he solved part of the problem. Here you have to be proved beyond reasonable doubt by a competent court. Now these people have amassed wealth. These people, they syndicate corruption. How are you going to take them through the judiciary to have them convicted? That is also another problem. So we have gaps in the judiciary. People have learned how to bypass these laws, these strict laws that you have. Whose property are you going to confiscate? My colleague, let me share Milton's name now. He has property in the names of the cousin. And as you follow up, it is not his property. We have leaders told to declare. One declares a bicycle, the other declare,
and you look at the guy like, really?
And you wonder. So as long as we still have gaps in investigation, then that is worsened by corrupt, ill-minded people, greedy people in the judiciary.
You've one way or another brought in the weakness of institutions as well, which I do appreciate. Milton?
I think, actually, thank you for that glimpse, because they highlight on the legal perspective. But this country, I want to remind our viewers and our government that we need more high court judges. We have 46. The basic requirement would be 100 of them at every district level to make sure the 40 million people, for example, access justice. And that is where the problem is, as you have said. The moment you delay justice, the moment the judiciary, the system that actually say this one is wrong, this one is not wrong, this one should go to jail, the moment that gap is there, people will buy whatever is necessary, but it's using the time, So, but the most important thing, let us look at solving this problem from down. They have two recommendations. The president has actually brought it very clear that the public please join the government of Uganda to fight corruption. So he's taking this battle to your door. Me, I don't want to put this thing that we don't have a problem. Corruption is a huge problem here. And that's why the president in Kololo said, please join me. We fought for the battles in the bush. We won these dictators. We cannot fail. So you and me must realize that you are actually part of they call them these people who report these cases to IGG. Whistleblowers. Please get to know who is taking a bribe. Report. It is your money. This is your country. Love your country. In Rwanda, these things cannot happen. Then the second one, which is very key, which the president actually, I applaud him and I thank him, is actually to making sure Nakalema comes into. He wants now Nakalema to like Museveni wants to on daily basis to know who has eaten a bribe. That one is okay. These processes doing so. Nakalema is coming to be a link, so that Museveni, among other issues in the country, just like security, he wants now to have first-hand information. IGG, what's going on? Lokodo, what's going on? LOC1, what's going on? So Museveni now is taking on this battle as a personal detail. He wants in his bedroom to know what's going on and advising you, judge, what's going on. So, which is okay, which is really okay. I wish that the president and my government go down also to appreciate three things. One, education, because that's where we are manufactured from. I want to see character development being part of the educational model, so that children from universities, from secondary schools, come and join the government ready to pursue integrity, coming to love that culture of accountability. Then that one will be, because now Makerere and all our universities are churning out students who are from Chigezi, my village, Karambi. Everyone is coming to just carry money. They have not come to build a nation. So we need patriotic teachers. All of them. Not all of them, basically. Yeah, that's true. But the issue is we must make sure all Ugandans, a tomato, one rotten tomato will spoil the whole basket, isn't it?
You can remove it.
That's what they are saying. That's what they are saying. Unless we go into the education system, unless we sit down with our parents, me and you, we love to
I disagree. I want to disagree with Milton at a very big percentage.
Yes.
You know, because we have institutions, you get it, mandated, like you're mandated to do something, and you're not doing it. Before we call this a battle of everybody, you know, there are people that are mandated to do it. You've talked of Nakalima. With maximum respect and very hopeful, because I want to see corruption end. But I'm still wondering how the new unit would arrest, prosecute corrupt officials through the same system that has failed, continuously failed some of these activities. You know?
Yes.
I think, moderator, one of the gaps that we need to raise, because we risk meandering all over. For instance, the Kanro Nakarima department or unit cannot simply do everything. It must focus, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
One of the challenges personally that I see, I would like to quote this gentleman, Justice John Bosco Katusi. You remember when he was trying the Chogam cases and making a ruling on June 29, 2010. This is what he said, and I would like to read it verbatim.
Please.
He said that the court is tired of trying therapias when crocodiles are left swimming. So trying Mukene, but the big fish, the Nile perch. So in terms of Cameron Nakarema's contribution, for me, would be successful to the extent that it becomes kind of a central pillar, literally like what you see with the office of the Prime Minister, or rather what it should be.
Okay.
To be a coordinator of anti-corruption efforts, accountability efforts, to supervise, to superintend, and to provide that kind of oversight, linkage, direct and quick linkage with cabinet. Okay. Because also we are not just talking about President Museveni alone. He can't be the same person to be commissioning the school in Kotido. He flies to Kasese for something else. He has to arbitrate at the African Union and has to continue to the European Union to negotiate on behalf of Uganda.
Okay.
So we need to be clear. So in terms of Nakarema's contribution, therefore for me, it is a welcome move. It has been looked at squarely in the overall government configuration, with the view that we need to reduce the multiplicity of government institutions so that we can remove duplication and be able to have resources available for work, for development expenditure. Even when some of these institutions have come aboard, you'll find if you scrutinize their budgets, if you scratch a little deeper, you'll notice that there is huge spending on recurrent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That needs to be overturned across government, including the Nakarema's area. For instance, in the CSOs, we've had cases, we've had a practice for years.
Okay.
That your administration costs should never go beyond 25%. It is one of the remedies we need to look up to in government, so that there isn't simply plenty of money available under recurrent expenditure, where there's a lot of stealing happening.
Indeed.
So the other bit for me, lastly, on the Nakarema intervention, is that it should focus. Let it focus on the office of the Prime Minister, staff, and other people who stole the 50 billion shillings, you remember, under PRDP.
Yes.
The list had hundreds of people.
Specific.
They have all gone scot-free. The Chogam cases were never concluded. The grand corruption cases is what that institution will need to focus on. Not simply to say, LC1, what is happening in your
area.
That a police person has taken 10,000 shillings.
Okay,
when billions are swimming across. And with our elaborate intelligence network in Uganda, I believe that you cannot steal even 1 million shillings of public money without being detected.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, let's look at strategies. What is the way forward? Let's look at what we're looking at in terms of how we can best handle this issue.
I thank you, my colleagues. This is what we call a debate.
Yes.
But I will not say on the contrary. I agree with them that I should not generalize. But I want to tell you again, I take a position. We are fighting a serious kaukumi here. One of the strategies that I really would like to recommend, just as the president has brought it in actually a very crude way, that we need new workers. In my perspective, I feel that we need to actually revise a law. You know, it is even hard to chase a public servant in Uganda. You know, it is very hard to assess his or her performance. You are working in the Bank of Uganda, you're a bank governor, you cannot supervise. You know that they have their own bosses. So it is completely very hard. And it is going to cause harm to our legacy as NRM, as a government, because the only thing we can leave behind, gentlemen, and our mothers, is the legacy that we have left behind, a population with values. And so it begins with human resource new performance assessment. That is number one. Today, there is a research that has just come out. It is on. It was funded by the African Union to pursue the gaps in the human resource system in Africa, and it found out that 90% of public servants in Africa lack the 21st century competencies. Whereas in the United States, in America, and some African countries like South Africa, every 5 years they build a framework that assesses the performance of workers. When you are rewarding, who's supposed to be rewarded? But here in Uganda, basically, you just look at someone's face because he's smart, like the way I am here, even lack of competence, you just say, I have promoted you. Without going deeper into the recruitment process. What are those 21st century competencies that you base on to recruit?
Does that happen? Where does that happen, that simply somebody has been seen in a suit?
It happens.
And is simply taken
it happens in this country.
It is more than that.
And if you are in part of this country, you know, and the viewers know, that in this country, when people are rewarded, when we are recruiting, people continue even to recruit their own brothers without even going through the channels that the law has prescribed. So we request those in government, even the private sector, because it's not just as government, as you say, that most of the time we look at corruption in the government. Corruption is in the family, in the private sector, in the churches, everywhere. So when you are recruiting, the 21st century competencies, integrity is number one, ethical culture. And there is a benchmark upon which they measure integrity. And even assessing performance every year. Even the contracts we must have with public servants must be every year. And assessed every 3 months, so that we are able to crack down good workers into government to remain and the bad ones go, based on that too.
We'll definitely get time to have you give some of those views further. As we're heading into the festive season, people need to know some of these things. Real quick, gentlemen, we're left with 2 minutes.
Brief, One, we must fight selective justice. You know, because over time, people that have amassed wealth, they are very rich. And they have also amassed power politically. So where we have selective justice, you can't fight corruption. Then we also must empower institutions and leave them independent. The IGG will tell you that she has reports, she has tried to act, but if there is lack of independence of institutions that fight corruption, then we have nowhere to go. Then second, or lastly, we must ensure that the fight of corruption, we must have the political will, not to be said, but to be seen. Yes, we come from the same party. Yes, you're my member of parliament. Yes, you campaigned for me as a LC chairman. But if you've caught stealing funds, do I have the will to sacrifice you?
Okay.
The nation needs sacrifices.
Yeah. Okay. Now, real quickly, Julius, as we wind up.
Let's stick to the rules, even under their current configuration. Gaps, in other words, notwithstanding. I'll just give a quick example. Look at this poster. I hope your cameras can be able to project it to Ugandans. On the continued misuse of government assets, public assets, in this particular case, government vehicles. This was, for instance, Ministry of Health vehicle for Masaka district, for one of the health center force, but is carrying beer to a function. It is supposed to be an ambulance. So start with that, using government's current standing orders, bring sanity. The other one for me is focus for now on cases of grand corruption. Let us recover our money under Chogam. Let us recover our money under the Valley Dams in 1994, billions of money that was moreover borrowed, escalating the debt problem we have in Uganda. Otherwise, let us focus on the oil issues that have been raised by Parliament. Let us recover, including the presidential handshake, the worth $1.7 million that was simply parceled out to people. Begin by recovering that.
All of that.
And then we can talk about. Ugandans have waited for such a long time for action, for tilapia, beyond tilapia, for real crocodiles, and that is
we need to get the crocodiles. Interesting. Thank you so much, gentlemen. He has just spoken to us. He's been giving his last remark there at the extreme end. Julius Kipepwe, who is Director of Programs, Uganda Debt Network. And what they say is, debt is slavery. And right next to him there is a friend and colleague, that is Chirabo Robert Nyonyintono, of course giving a couple of views and knowing that this is indeed a problem for us. I like that you've pointed out a couple of issues. Right next to me here is Milton Kambura, who is of course ambassador, peace ambassador, global peace, and of course he is one of the directors, Integrity Uganda, and he says one of the most prominent of them all, yeah?
Yes, please.
Interesting. But thank you so much, gentlemen. Very, very great discussion there. And I must say, we cannot exhaust this, but we will get time to bring you a couple of these discussions later on, or within, as we wind up the year. This will be very good for us if we did a sort of more extensive discussion on that. But well, Good Morning Uganda, do not go away. Ruben is going to be coming in after this, but you're still watching Good Morning Uganda.